Coming up, an interview with a legend on a story of a song that was written on a bet. This legend was staying with a friend in Hawaii, and he was getting ready to leave the island to go home when his friend said, you know, if you're such a big shot songwriter, let's see if you can write a song before you go. I'll bet you $500 you can't. Well, needless to say, he wrote a song quickly, and let's just say he won the bet. Yeah, it also became his legendary group's biggest hit. Coming up next, again, an exclusive interview with this legend, shares the story of this and another classic song on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember reading books to get some pizza from Pizza Hut through their Book It program back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Do you remember that?
Book It is a reading incentive program that encourages young people to read.
Make sure to subscribe below right now for your daily dose of musical nostalgia. Click the bell so you always know when our stuff comes out, when our interviews drop. We also have a Patreon. We have additional content there that helps us keep it a daily channel. You can become an honorary producer and help us keep the music alive and the history flowing. So it's time for another edition, another episode from our series, Revelations, one of my favorite programs on here. In this show, we feature artists. They reveal rare stories about their biggest songs and their biggest albums. This one is going to be a good one. On this installment, we're bringing you the story behind several classics by a legendary group. One came from an ordinary moment, and one came from a $500 bet. Both of them became classics. Both were written by Graham Nash, who's here with the story. Crosby, Stills, and Nash kicked it into high gear after their debut album, of course. Had classics like Sweet Judy Blue Eyes.
I am yours, you are mine, you are what you are.
The Marrakesh Express, amongst others.
Would you know we're riding on the Marrakesh Express?
They actually got with Neil Young after that and became Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and they released the album Deja Vu, which included even more classic songs that would put them in the highest echelon of popular music, from Carry On.
Carry on, love.
Teach Your Children.
Teach your children well.
Woodstock. To Cut My Hair.
Almost cut my hair.
To today's featured song, one of them, Our House.
Our house is a very, very, very fine.
Our House came from an ordinary moment when Graham Nash was living with Joni Mitchell and the two were out and about in LA and had a day together before they went home. Graham will tell you the story in the interview. It's very interesting. One of the things that makes Our House so special are the unique vocal harmonies. We're talking about Crosby, Stills, and Nash here, of course. Graham was saying in an interview about this, I quote, "It's me and David Crosby and Stephen Stills doing our best. That's all we ever do. You know, we're lucky enough to be able to do, you know, anything that we want to do musically. And, you know, these two guys are incredible musicians. Crosby is one of the most unique musicians I know, and Stephen Stills has got this blues-based South American kind of feeling to his music. And I'm this, you know, Henry V guy from England. It's not supposed to work, you know, but it does somehow." I love that. Our House, it's become a classic. That was actually Crosby, Stills, and Nash's last hit for a while, since they worked on other projects before coming together again in 1977 for their third studio album, CSN. It hit number 30 in the US, but much bigger than its chart position, Our House. But this classic song, Graham Nash has become bored of the song. In fact, he once mentioned in an interview that he was bored with Our House the day after he recorded it. But he says he's played it here and there since because the fans love it so much.
With two cats in the yard, life used to be.
So after their tour in the summer of 1970 to promote Deja Vu, Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young, as I said, they worked on other projects. The one thing they did all together was a reunion tour with Neil Young in 1974 when they released a compilation album with their best songs on it called So Far. And then David Crosby and Graham Nash, they recorded 3 albums as a duo. And then Crosby released a single solo album as well. He also released a reunion album with the Byrds during that time. And then Stephen Stills did his own projects. He released 4 solo albums in that time from 70 to 77. He had a short stint with Manassas that equaled 2 albums as well. He also did a tour with Neil Young. By the time they all got back together to do a proper album, it had been 7 years. Well, it just so happens that their first hit off the CSN album, it was released in 77, was a Graham Nash penned hit called Just a Song Before I Go.
Just a song before I go to.
Which, as I mentioned in the opening, was a song that came from a bet. Graham has the full story next in our exclusive interview. It's really funny. Plus, we're going to have some cameos by the other band members. Now, as I've mentioned before on our show, my dad loved Crosby, Stills Nash. He played them all the time when I was growing up. He would tell me all the stories behind their songs and also the stories of his own experiences that were tied to the individual songs and albums, and those were my favorite. I was always really excited to hear the stories of each of the members and how they got their start in music. He had every single one of their albums on 8-track. You know, come to think of it, he had them all on vinyl too, double. My dad would play their music, and I remember he'd get so excited, he'd tap me on the shoulder and be like, listen to this part. Wait for it. Here it is. Man, what did you think about that? And he'd say things like, man, you'll never hear singing like that ever again. I was always happy to see him light up when their music would play. And it made me feel really special when he'd show me all the little intricacies of their songs, what made them special or different or unique. Yeah, I may have shared this before, but when I got the chance to interview each one of them, David Crosby, Stephen Stills, and Graham Nash, this was at different times, I was really excited because I knew my dad would be beyond elated. So I actually took the original record that he passed on to me. I took it to every single individual interview I did. Now, they were spread out over like a year and a half. I didn't know if I'd get them all to sign, but I got them to sign above their picture on the album. When I got that last signature, man, I felt like I'd won the lottery. It was the last piece of a musical puzzle that I felt like I'd been putting together with my dad for so many years when I was a kid. And then I got to give it to him, you know, the signed record for Christmas. This was a few years before he passed away. This is one of my favorite moments of our time together. The joy I saw in his eyes as he unwrapped the gift and saw all 3 signatures, it's just one of my most precious memories of this thing we call life. I was so happy to give him this gift because he'd given me such a gift through childhood, you know, sharing their music. Music that's become my music and defined me and lifted my spirits over the long haul. Just a gift that, you know, I pass on to my own kids and hopefully they'll pass on to theirs. It's why I do what I do.
And know they love you.
So as I was saying, each member of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, they've been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame multiple times, once with this band, and then David Crosby was inducted as a member of the Byrds, and Stephen Stills as a member of Buffalo Springfield, and Graham Nash as a member of the Hollies. And Neil Young, he's been inducted twice as a solo artist, as a member of Buffalo Springfield, and them. So, man, it's just cool. This is such a legacy. Let's get into it. We start this interview. I do want to thank our sponsors, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses I always wear. When you go to Zenni, with our little info button right up here, you can choose from hundreds of styles, colors, and looks. You can add amazing features like blue blocks to protect your eyes from digital blue light. There's also migraine glasses to help you if you have migraine relief. Telling you, once you order a pair of Zennis, you'll never want for another brand. Here is the story of these 2 songs coming up in our exclusive interview.
I'll light the fire. You.
I want to talk about Deja Vu. Of course, went to #1.
Now we're making Deja Vu. We're in San Francisco at Wally Heider's Studio 3. We're halfway through the album, and I go to Steve and I says, you know, we don't have Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. The first time that Stephen Stills ever played me Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, I thought it was an amazing piece of music. I didn't quite understand, you know, who this man was. I recognized that he had a certain level of genius. It was 4 pieces of music that were unfinished that he very beautifully placed together into this suite.
It's a suite in 4 pieces. Tell me about that song, how that came about.
Well, it was exactly that. I had these songs started. I would get an idea, and then somebody would call me, and then I'd forget where I was. And I had this idea, and I just put it together.
We did it. That's a great record. Steven says, I'm just not sure we got the suite. And we said, you're out of your mind. And he said, no, I just am not sure we got it, man. So we recut it. Took us 2 days, 7 minutes, 22 seconds.
Wow.
We recut the whole thing. There is another version of the suite. Wasn't better.
You are mine, you are what you are.
He goes, I know, we used it on the first record. I said, no, not the song. We don't have that song where if you put it on, you're not going to take the needle off the record, after that track. Where's that track? He goes, oh, I see what you mean. Let me think about it. Comes to me next day, and we're staying at the Caravan Lodge Motel. It was this really funky motel in San Francisco in the Tenderloin district. Really ugly place. Knocks on my door. He says, Willie, remember what we were talking about yesterday? I go, about the song? He goes, yeah. He said, yeah, I remember. He goes, listen to this. And he plays me Carry On. What can you do?
Now 8 million copies have been sold. 8 times platinum. And start with Our House, because that's a song that I knew again when I was like 3, 4 years old. One of my first memories of music, period, is hearing this record all the time. My dad played this. He had the 8-track, he had the record, and had the cassette tape. Starts out with of course, Joni Mitchell and you having the house in Laurel Canyon. Tell me that story.
I say this a lot on stage because people are I'm finding fascinated by where were you when you wrote Our House? What were you thinking? How did it, they're interested in that burst of creativity that brings music to the front. And I tell people at concerts that music comes from the most ordinary places sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Ordinary stuff, right? And Our House is a great example. I took Joni to breakfast. We're going back to her car, and we passed an antique store, and she's looking in the window, and she saw a beautiful little vase that she wanted, right? About 9 inches tall, clear, some hand-painted flowers around the edge. It was beautiful. It wasn't very expensive, so she bought it. And it was one of them mornings, sometimes in Los Angeles in the early winter, where it gets to be gray and cloudy and cold and rainy and miserable. And we got back to her house in Laurel Canyon, and I got through the front door, and I said, hey, Joan, why don't I light a fire and you put some flowers in that vase that you bought today? Simple, right?
You place the flowers in the vase.
And you knew, right, when you said that, I believe that you went immediately to the piano and started to put it together.
Joni was in the garden getting flowers for the vase, and that means that she wasn't at her piano, but that means I was.
Interesting thing is that it was used in episode Only Fools and Horses, the most watched episode of that series.
Is that right?
British series, yeah.
How wild.
It's used in pop culture all over, movies and so many different covers of it, but How I Met Your Mother just used it as well a couple of years ago on an episode.
And sometimes a little magical.
It's just that song that continues to be played.
I know, I seem to have hit a nerve with that.
Today.
Just a song before I go. What a great story behind that. Tell that one real quick if you don't mind.
Just a song before I go to.
The truth is I won a lot of money with that song. I was in Maui at the time. I was at a house of a friend of mine who was not really a friend, he was an acquaintance, but he was a low-level weed dealer in Maui. And I was at his house when we were smoking, and he said to me, you're supposed to be some big songwriter. I bet you can't write a song just before you go. I said, really? How much? He said, $500. I said, $500? Okay. I sat down at his piano and I wrote it.
When we opened up the door, I
Don't forget, he'd already given me the title.
Yeah.
Just the song before I know it.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize that's the biggest hit Crosby, Stills Nash ever had as far as
As far as a single, yeah.
Yeah, as a single goes.
A lesson to be learned.
Want to ask you Daylight again really quick, Wasted on the Way. I always like that.
Time we have wasted on the way.
Another song I remember, because I remember when my dad bought this album and brought it home because he bought it the day it came out. And I had a memory of him bringing it down, looking at the cover and going, what is this, you know? It's a great thing about vinyl, but tell me about that one real quick. Wasted on the Way.
Somebody once told me that between David and Stephen and Neil and I, we've probably written over 1,000 songs. And of course, you know, it doesn't matter how many, it's how good.
Yeah.
But we have written a lot of songs. But you can't show me a magic piece of music and not expect me to want more all the time. And I was thinking about this, how, you know, if we hadn't been so drugged out or egoed out or whatever it is, if we hadn't been so distracted, we could have made a lot more music. And that's why I wrote Wasted on the Way.
Love we have wasted on the way.
This Path Tonight, Encore. What a great song.
Encore was a song that Shane and I wrote about this. Regardless of how famous you think you are, who are you, really? Who are you when the last song is sung and the last show's over? Are you a decent person that wants to give to the world and the universe, or are you constantly taking? Who are you? And also, as a second part of my answer, I'm the kind of person that always thinks there's another song. You know, and I laughingly refer to it, but I'm serious. I'll be writing a song as they're putting my coffin lid down. I want to be constantly writing.
Looking back on your life, if you were to gift the world a 45, double A side, we'll call it, like they did back in the day where you had to hit on both sides. If you were to gift the world, this is what Graham Nash is about. This is one song on each side and you gifted to the world. What would those two songs be?
I'd give them 3 songs. I'd give them Teach Your Children.
Teach your children well.
I would give them Ohio.
How can you run when you know?
And I would give them God Only Knows by the Beach Boys.
I love it.
He knows what I'd be without you.
Brian Wilson, without doubt, is an utter genius. Pet Sounds is probably one of the greatest records ever made, apart from maybe Revolver and Sgt. Pepper, or maybe Bookends. That's a brilliant record, Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah, I have nothing but utter respect for Brian Wilson.
And last of all, looking back on your life, your career, even your personal life, everything put together, what do you feel is the accomplishment or that you're proudest of, your greatest accomplishments looking back right now?
A couple of things. One, I do believe that the music that I've helped create has touched people's hearts and minds for many, many years.
Absolutely.
And secondly, I'm incredibly lucky and I'm an incredibly grateful man to be doing what I do. My life is magic and I have no idea why. I'm glad to be who I am. I'm trying my best to be the best person I can be. Yeah. I'm trying to be the best father, the best friend, the best musician, and I'll never make it. But I'm gonna try my best.
Just a song before I go.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to leave us a comment about these classic songs. What are your thoughts on Crosby, Stills, and Nash, on Graham Nash, on this interview, on these songs? So cool that he wrote this song on a bet and it became their biggest hit. Man, it's just only in rock and roll. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. We would love to have you as part of our community where we keep the history, talk about it every day, and reminisce, keep these songs alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.